From as long as I can remember, my dad was always involved with the church, Christ the King to start with. We had moved here in 1961 and kind of immediately gravitated toward that church. And so I was a little kid, but I always remember him being involved with the church. He was a lector. He was a usher. He was one of the first Eucharistic ministers.
I guess my earliest memories of, in terms of helping out people, there were things that Mom and Dad did around the church, volunteering their time. That was probably the earliest things I remember.
That was his passion, if you will. Dad didn't exactly have a lot of hobbies. He didn't play golf or anything like that. He tended to be on some kind of commission, doing some kind of service. That was his thing.
My real involvement with Catholic Charities was when it was Catholic Family Services, and the agency had just hired a new director, Kathleen Walsh. And I got a phone call one day from her, and she said, I've kind of been looking at some people for the board, and your name came across. And so I want to invite you to be a board member. I thought about it not too long, and I called her back and said I would love to be a board member. So that's how I came on board. And so it was under her leadership that we started the Night to Remember. And the two people who were very strong people on the board was Joe Hart and David Busher.
I remember him having tickets for it, and it was kind of a big deal because it was a $10,000, you bought a ticket and you won $10,000. And he always had a handful of those tickets wherever he went. He was always selling them. He hawked them. He was a good salesman. That's what he did for a living most of his life. But he raised a lot of money. He was always working for sponsors, donations, things like that. And again, I remember that specifically, that he had that handful of tickets all the time. So
I remember him calling on people a lot of times, and he was very, he could be very direct, and but he got the job done. It wasn't if you wanted to buy a ticket to a fundraiser, it was how many do you want to buy. So that was his personality, and that's the way he took a look at things. And no, I don't think he wanted to be in front of the spotlight, and I think Mom would be the same way, So, but they like to see things get done as far as making things get better and raising money for those in need. So,
like when he'd talk about Catholic Family Service back then, he would, use phrases like, "Oh, well, we're here to help anybody. We don't care who you are, where you're from, whatever. Our job's to help people no matter what, period, tailgate, amen." He always had to end it with something like that, and people are like, "What'd he say?" So
I was somewhat clueless to exactly how much success we were going to have, but we were all very excited, and it was something new. It was something that we'd hope would help Catholic Family Services by, providing some funds. So it was something new and exciting, and really we look forward to it and worked very hard to make sure that it happened. So yeah, it was exciting. It was, I'm glad that it turned out as well and that it had its run as long as it did.
And all of us felt like he was a kind of a guiding light. And, just without saying a whole lot, he just was one of those guys I still often tell myself what would Joe Hart do in this situation? So he led by example.
Most connection was with Joe Hart and Dave Busher because they were on my committee. And what I remember is Joe Hart, he was a Yankee, as we would call it down here, but very strong in his beliefs, really cared for people and wanted to make sure that we were doing the right thing for people. So I remember that. David was a little bit more reserved, but again, the same kind of values were there about, are we I think when they looked at the picture of, the people we were helping, how we were helping, they were very committed. So, yeah.
I don't think it's so much Dad, but for all the people that really helped and that are no longer here, it's kind of for the rest of us to pick up where they left off and do some of the things they've done, and not only that, but what's going to be new around the corner to help out with things. So, but I think Dad just hopefully he's remembered as someone that he served the people around him, and I think that's what he'd like.
Well, I think Dad's philosophy, I mean, he is a good steward, and he's like, if you've been blessed, you have to give back, you have to return what you've been given, and that's pretty much how he lived his life.